Hello, my name is Olivia Cooper. I'm a clinical research assistant working on Wisdom's Environmental Exposures Project. Today, we will be walking through the CBCRP Working Women's Exposures Tool. For context, the Working Women's Exposure Tool is a website that you can use to understand which, if any, chemicals you may have been exposed to in your workplace. The tool reviews 161 occupations for potential exposures to 24 chemicals that are known to increase the risk of developing breast cancer. The tool was created by the California Breast Cancer Research Program, CBCRP, an initiative that focuses and funds policy research and breast cancer prevention, building on existing special research initiatives by investigating the environmental factors contributing to breast cancer and addressing the unequal burden of the disease. The tool only reviews 161 occupations, so it is possible that your occupation may not be listed within the tool. We suggest finding an occupation as close to yours as you can get to get an idea of your exposures or typing in multiple synonyms. For example, for flight attendant, air hostess could be entered. These 161 populations do cover 80% of the female California workforce. So one way to think about occupations similar to yours is also just considering the environment in which you work. If you worked in an office, other office jobs listed likely have the similar exposures to your own that you can explore. Now let's dive into the tool. When we open the page, it usually goes through some introductory statistics that you'll see when you open it yourself. But now that we've arrived at the tool, let me orient you to some different modalities you can play with. You can either search for your specific occupation through the Find and Compare tool, or you could sort the occupation list by numbers of women and see exposures for the most popular occupations. So this sorts it by number, and this sorts it alphabetically. So let's look at an example. Say you are a registered nurse. We type nurse into the search bar, which populates race and ethnicity statistics to the right. You can also explore the demographic of the career by age. Hovering my cursor over the demographic section, as you can see, the overview pops up saying these women may be exposed to risky chemical groups at work. Let's tap here to explore more. As we can see, the list of 24 possible chemicals shows up here labeled with probable, possible, and unlikely. Probable meaning that it's likely to have been encountered in your workplace, possible meaning you potentially may have encountered it, and unlikely meaning that it's improbable that you would have encountered such a chemical in your occupation. There are more detailed descriptions of these here as well. So, based on which career you selected in the tool, you'll be able to see breast cancer-linked chemicals that you may have encountered in your workplace. Now, the likelihood of being exposed to each of these 24 chemicals is different for each career, hence the scale to the left, which helps you understand the extent to which you may have been exposed to each chemical. For example, registered nurses are probably exposed to antimicrobials, cleaning and maintenance products, fragrance ingredients, and phthalates, which are highlighted in red. There are other chemicals that they possibly may have been exposed to, like pharmaceuticals or plastics. These are highlighted in yellow. And finally, anything that registered nurses are unlikely to have come in contact with are labeled with dark purple. It's unlikely that nurses would come into contact with metals or combustion byproducts, for example. When you find your career in the tool, you can select the most probable chemical exposures to learn more about them. For example, let's look at antimicrobials. It brings us to a page about them. Antimicrobials are a blanket term for 32 chemicals of concern linked with breast cancer in research literature. The website also gives a description of what that might mean. So, antibacterial or antiviral cleaning products. It gives numerical information about the numbers of formal workers with exposure level, possible and probable, and also why these chemicals are of concern for breast cancer. Here, we see that antimicrobials include 1 mammary gland carcinogen and 32 endocrine disruptors, and that 20 are produced in high volume, which means that they're produced by or imported into the United States by more than 1 million pounds or more per year. That's a lot. But keep in mind, that includes a lot of wipes that are used in hospitals, sprays that are used in exam rooms to sanitize them, and more. As we continue to scroll down the page, it breaks down the specific chemicals by name, if you're curious about which. The Selected Insights section highlights groups that may be disproportionately exposed to specific chemicals. For example, we see that cashiers may be exposed to chemicals of concern that include bisphenol A in cash register receipts and fragrance ingredients. There's more general data from the tool and highlights of the information. If you want to explore only your specific exposures, you can skip this. Now, let's go back to the tool. The tool also shows numerically the difference between formal and informal workers. Informal workers show up on the census as self-employed or operating outside of formal labor laws. We don't have much information on informal workers because of this. Now, back at the original search page, you could select every occupation you've had, or you can deselect and compare one occupation at a time. For example, if you were a nurse, you could also work as a secretary or administrative assistant in California at one point in time. So we can select both and compare. Let's do that now. Secretaries and administrative assistants. We can see that the majority are white or Hispanic. Again, this information is from the California Census. However, as we cover our cursor over the data, we see these women are unlikely to be exposed to risky chemical groups at work. Great. You can tap it anyway to see if there's even a single chemical to think about. Nope. All 24 chemicals are unlikely to be encountered in a specific workplace. As you can see, this tool can be interesting to play around with as you try to see what you might have been exposed to in your various workplaces. If you're curious about the chemicals in general, like how they were linked or how they can increase your risk of breast cancer, you can press the Explore Chemicals tab. This tab shows us all 24 chemical groups, how many chemicals are in each group, and how many are potentially exposed to them. You can tap each one and it'll bring you to the same page that we looked at earlier when we were looking at antimicrobials. Each chemical has its own page, complete with demographics and statistics information. Finally, if you were interested in how all this information came together or want to read any of the original sources, hop on over to the Methods and Sources page. This page shows the research aims of the project and how they sorted all the information that they got from the census labor data. So there's quite a lot of information here. But I'd like to point you to the chemicals of concern for breast cancer risk. Here, you'll find resources to learn more about what specific chemical types discussed in the chemical group pages, like the mammary gland carcinogens, endocrine disrupting chemicals, and mammary gland developmental toxicants. This is much more heavy data and cites the specific papers these chemicals came from, so it may be difficult to read and understand. But overall, this tool is a really useful way to be able to identify possible chemical groups you may have been exposed to in the workplace. If you have any more questions about your chemical exposures, please continue to explore the tool or contact CBCRP for more information. Remember, new information comes out every day, and some chemicals are still being assessed. Thank you for listening, and I hope that you enjoyed learning more about the CBCRP Working Women's Exposure Tool. Thank you.